Good morning, guys. Welcome to Thursday's training. If you don't know me, I'm Marshall Burtcher, and I help people heal and discover happiness after codependency by reconnecting them back to their value, voice, and vision. My clients and students typically see significant results within 4 to 12 weeks using that process to overcome their internalized loneliness, their trauma, the impact of narcissistic abuse, and codependency. Basically, you get back to being you. All right, so today we're going to do a little training on what's called internalized loneliness. So before we get to that, I need to share this with the community. If you're looking for a Facebook community that's got your back, that gives you trainings and tools, insight and guidance, and support and understanding, the community is the place to be. You can join us there by clicking the link above if you're on Facebook, and the link below if you're on YouTube. So let's see here. And if you're on YouTube, like the channel, subscribe, hit that little bell, and then comment below what you get out of this, both with Facebook too. Guys, let me know what you get out of this. Okay, I've got a type of thingy. Let's talk about internalized loneliness. Okay. Now I've got some cool martial art for you this morning that should be really interesting and fun to try with. So let's talk about loneliness first before we get to that. So there's two types of loneliness we deal with in life. Most people deal with just one, especially the people who've had healthy relationships, healthy family experience. They've been able to integrate and connect with themselves, that kind of thing. They typically are going to deal with what's called relational loneliness. This is situational. This is about, wanting a friend or wanting a significant other. It's that typical common loneliness that we all wrestle with at times in our lives. That's normal. That is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about a second type of loneliness called pathologized or internalized loneliness. And internalized loneliness is the experience of being cut off from self and everyone else. So I've got a little piece of art here. I'm going to switch the view over. Oh, it did not work. So let me see if I can get that to... There we go. All right. So now on the screen, you can see my little art here. Okay. I'm going to be drawing some things, and I'm down here in the corner so you can see me. I'm going to be drawing some things on here to help you understand what internalized loneliness is, okay? So when we are growing up as children, we get bonded with our parent, okay? We get an attachment there. And part of that experience is that we start to discover ourselves. We start to understand who we are. I'm going to just switch the view back so you can see me while I discuss this. So part of our identity is invested in the other person. We are discovering who we are through their feedback, through their reflection, and we're then comparing and contrasting the difference and sameness we find in ourselves with that feedback. This is partly how we go through a process called individuation or differentiation, depending on which model you want to come from. Well, if you've dealt with abandonment, if you've dealt with a narcissistic, codependent, emotionally unavailable parent, you're going to have some struggle here because that attachment bond did not complete itself. So what happens, this individuation, differentiation process matures into a healthy sense of self. I know who I am. I know who you are. I can differentiate between you and me. Really, really important. And that is critical to understanding internalized loneliness, because if this process is breached or ruptured in any way, we become really, really lonely because we're cut off from ourselves. So I'll switch back to the view here. Let's see. I want to check something here real quick. I'm going to move. Gonna get rid of this. Okay. Alright guys, there we are. So we're in the right place now. I've never done this live. I've only done this in class, so this is interesting. So right here we've been cut off from our internalized self. Okay, so what happened is the person we were bonded with vanished, and with them vanished our partial sense of self. What this ends up doing is we have an incomplete sense of self. And this little part right here, the inner self, becomes isolated from us. So we feel internalized, internally we feel frozen and cut off from people around us and from ourselves. I know this probably doesn't make any sense. I'm a kinetic learner, so when I do things, I figure out how to improve it. So, internalized loneliness basically means I'm disconnected from myself. I am unable to emotionally connect with me and warm myself up, to regulate, to validate, to understand, to nurture myself. So when we look inside ourselves, we feel isolated. We're frozen like this, like the little man here in the ice right here. We're frozen. We're stuck with ourselves. We don't have connection to self, and that part of ourself, this part of ourself, does not have connection with other, including doesn't have connection to us, and it doesn't have a connection to other people. Really, really important to understand that this is what the impact of narcissistic abuse fundamentally is we lose connection with ourself. Very, very important. This leads to this sensation of being completely isolated. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I feel. And I need somebody else to complete me. I need somebody else to bring wholeness into my life. I need somebody else to help me understand what I feel. And this is where that codependency comes in, where we're seeking ourselves through another human being. And this brings us around to feeling empty when they leave, to feeling devastated when we leave. And this is also the core of trauma bonding, because when we get that connection, someone bonds with us, we become euphoric, because an internalized, isolated sense of self finally has love again. They finally have, it's like they're in the desert and rain starts coming down. They're finally able to eat. They're finally able to drink. And what this does is it creates an enormous flood of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and then the fear element comes in, because trauma bonding's fear love. You get adrenaline, you get cortisol in there. And suddenly you're hooked on the other person. But it's all rooted in this internalized loneliness, this isolated internal aspect of self that has no connection to you or to anybody else. That's what it is. I'm going to work out a better way to describe it, I think. Let me know if this is making any sense, because this is really impromptu. I woke up this morning, I'm like, I want to talk about that, and now I've got to create kind of a visual model to help discuss it. Because in my own mind, it's like the little self, your internal child, the internal self, or the inner child, is in a box. And he can't talk to people, he can't see people, he can't get nobody can talk to him, but they can see him. So he's not able to connect and communicate and get his needs nourished and met. And this is what this creates. This is what happens to us when we've been abandoned, especially as a child, when we've been neglected in huge and traumatic events, both as a child and especially as a child, because if an adult gets abandoned in a huge, massive event, they typically go into a common shock, common trauma. We can work that out. But as a child, if you're abandoned in life, you're abandoned in problems, you're abandoned to your own emotions, you're left to solve things on your own, you start to feel really, really alone. And you start to feel cut off internally. And that leaves you in that frozen state of emotional isolation. So how do we heal internalized loneliness? That's really the challenge here. Because internalized loneliness is about thawing into the pain of the abandonment and the emptiness that comes with internalized loneliness. We have to lean into that emptiness, because it's actually not empty. It's just not something we know how to hear yet. It's not something we know how to understand yet. When we connect back with that emptiness, we find that it's actually quite populated with quite a few points of view, energy, inspirations, guidance, pain, loneliness, grief, anger, a desire to love, a desire to connect, a desire to contribute. There's a huge amount of brilliance and beauty that's in that emptiness that's there. And that's where we start rediscovering who we really are. Okay? When we really connect back to this emptiness and let it expand itself into our awareness, we start finding ourselves again. We start finding our innate value, our true voice, and our genuine vision for our life. This is where we start discovering us in a way that brings us joy. This is where we realize that what we've gone through was a result of how we've been treated by another human being, something deficiency or problem or failure in their part. Not, we didn't go through what we went through because of who we are. It's really more, they couldn't show up, they didn't show up, they wouldn't show up. We don't know what those factors are. It's really important to acknowledge that some people don't have the capacity to do it. It's important to acknowledge that some people want to do it, but they don't know how to, so they didn't. I would put my mother in that category. It's important to acknowledge that some people know how to and they don't. That's an extremely sociopathic individual. And it's important to acknowledge that it doesn't matter if they knew or didn't know. It matters that it happened, and that how you feel is what is more important than anything else. So this idea of internalized loneliness can be healed through reconnection with self and that emptiness, and then restoring safe bonds with safe, reliable, honest people in your life. Because you need it internally and you need it externally. Okay? Internalized loneliness cannot be healed in isolation to yourself. Yes, you need to become reconnected with yourself and vitalized and re-energized in your emotions and in your awareness of self. And then that needs to be connected with others. You need to learn how to build safe bonds with other human beings so that you'll have that network of safety around you that allows you to feel safe in the world. And that allows you to thaw more and to get more connected, more energized, more available to you. So let me know what you guys think about this, because my mind does not feel like it's very clear. And I want to get a more discrete model on it, but knowing if this is landing or not will help me. Okay? Hey, Kate. So, internalized loneliness is the result of being abandoned as a child, physically and emotionally, to life. And it's this internalized sense of I'm unworthy of being loved and seen, and cutting off connection to self. Sometimes we eject ourselves. Sometimes we exile that aspect of self into the desert so that we don't have to deal with that pain, that emptiness, that shock of that trauma. And sometimes it happens to us because of what we've been through. Mine was a combination of both, and my journey then required me to do a combination of both. I had to reconnect with self. I had to deal with the abandonment I went through, both with my mother's death and then with the subsequent chronic cycles of abandonment with my father and stepmother. Really, guys, when we really legitimize our experience and acknowledge, hey, yeah, I was not cared for the way I needed to be. I was not met in the way I needed to be met. I was not understood in the way I needed to be understood. Then we can really connect back to that emptiness and that real, genuine pain that's there. And that's going to start healing that internalized loneliness. It will also heal the euphoria that comes with trauma bonding, because you'll no longer need the hit in order to feel alive, to feel full, to feel connected, because you'll have a stable connection to self, which creates a stable, healthy nourishment of real love. So I hope this made sense. Let me know in the comments if it did. That's it for today's impromptu training. I hope that this helps you understand a bit more about internalized loneliness. And if you want help, you want assistance in breaking through on this, join the Happiness Strategy. I'm accepting students into the automated course right now. You can do that by taking the workshop that is linked above on Facebook, below on YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. And then let me know, guys, in the comments what you got out of this. I appreciate you, and remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. And I will see you guys next week for our next series of trainings on thriving beyond codependency. Okay, you guys have a great day. Be safe out there. Talk soon. Bye-bye.